Let's start today with the cost of groceries, which remains a top concern as an affordability crisis keeps Canadians in its grips. After months of pushback, Loblaw says it's ready to sign the Grocery Code of Conduct, or the Grocer Code of Conduct, describing a revised version of it as now, quote, fair. The Code of Conduct aims to provide guidelines for fair dealings between grocery retailers and their suppliers, but it's only voluntary, and not all of the 5 major grocers have signed on. It's also one of the measures the feds pledged to accelerate back in the fall as a way to help stabilize the cost of groceries. The move from Loblaw comes as some Canadians are boycotting all Loblaw-owned stores in response to high food prices, but the company says its announcement has nothing to do with those demands. So once in place, will a code of conduct really impact your grocery bill, and is more foreign competition on the way? Industry Minister Francois-Phillipe Champagne is with us now to answer those questions. Minister, great pleasure to see you as always. Thank you for making the time.
Well, it's great to be with you from Quebec City today.
Yes,
so, real pleasure.
Glad to have you from Quebec as always. Minister, I wanted to start off on the question of the Code of Conduct. The news from Loblaw comes at the same time as we know that Walmart is still holding out. And Loblaw predicated its signing on to the Grocer Code of Conduct on all its competitors doing the same. Are you involved in any discussions to try and compel Walmart to sign on?
No, you know me, Vashi. Of course we are. You know, we've put pressure on Loblaws for months now, and we were very clear with them that whether they would sign on to the Code of Conduct voluntarily, otherwise there'd be legislation. So I think, you know, the pressure we put, and consumers generally, we were pushing on them. And now, as you might expect, the pressure is full on Walmart and Costco to do the same. We want all the large grocers in the country to sign on to the Code of Conduct. In my meetings with the Independent Grocer Associations of Canada, those represent about 4,900 smaller players and some of the smaller retailers and those who are part of the ecosystem. This is all about fairness and transparency. And we're going to put the pressure, and I call on them now. I mean, we're together. We've been reaching out to Walmart. I'm reaching out to Costco to say, listen, this is not a matter of choice. Consumers, Canadians, expect you to sign on the Code of Conduct, and we want you to do that very quickly. And we're going to keep the pressure on them.
You referenced just now the possibility of legislation, and I did want to ask you about that when you talk about applying pressure and what exactly that would mean, because the House committee that was looking into this did make a recommendation that there be essentially a law that would make it mandatory to compel these grocers to sign on. Is that a recommendation that you have formally accepted? Like, if they don't sign on, are you prepared to introduce legislation that would make it mandatory?
Well, listen, they will sign on. I mean, I have all faith that they'll do that. We've put pressure on Loblaws, and you see the outcome. Obviously, I don't think it would be tenable for Costco or Walmart to disregard what the will of the Government of Canada is and Canadian consumers. So we've been reaching out to them. We've done the same with Loblaws. But for me, Loblaws was really the one we need to convince to make sure that all the others would come on board. And like I said, now it's full pressure on the others to join, because that's the right thing to do. And they understand, as I said to Loblaws, and I'm saying it to you very publicly, you know, Canadians expect them to do so, and they expect them to do so very quickly. So that's the nature of the discussions we have in the background with both Walmart and Costco.
Respectfully, though, when you talk about that action coming quickly, it has not. This Grocer Code of Conduct has been in the works for years. You announced, as we referenced in the introduction, Minister, that you would attempt to accelerate it through that pressure back in the fall. It's been more than 8 months since that happened. Now one grocer has decided to change its mind. How can you be sure? You said the other 2 will sign on. My question, though, to you was whether or not, if they don't, you are prepared to make it mandatory through legislation. Can you answer that question specifically?
Well, I would say they were waiting in a way for Loblaws to come on board. And I would say when you have Loblaws who represent 30% of the market in Canada, I would tell you it seems to me untenable for either Walmart and Costco not to join the Code of Conduct, because that's what the industry wants. It's not just the government, it's not just the consumer, but that's what the industry wants. So, Vashi, if we've been able to succeed collectively in pushing Loblaws towards signing, I'm very confident that we'll be able to do the same with Walmart and Costco. They understand that if they want to operate in Canada, they have to be part of the solution. I'm fairly confident that we'll get to where we need to be in a relatively short time period.
And I do certainly take your point, Minister, on time. But I think for many consumers and Canadians who are watching right now, I mean, they are struggling under the weight of how much those grocery prices have gone up, right? And it's against that backdrop that I'm asking the question, because what I interpret from your last two answers is that you are not willing to introduce legislation to compel them should those other two grocers not do what you expect them to do.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen. We've been very clear that if it did not happen, but this was at the time we needed to push Loblaws. Now you're talking about two of the smaller players in the industry. So when you have the big players, when you have, Sobeys, Metro, and Loblaws, which are, market leaders in Canada, when you're down to the two others, all the indication that I have is that we will be able to achieve that. But I've always been clear on that, Vashi. All the tools of the government are on the table to make sure we reach that. Like you said, this is just one of the many things we've been trying to do. We still need to tackle food price stability. This is one item. It's going to provide fairness and more transparency. I can tell you there were a number of practices in the industry that I've learned when we engaged with independent grocers that were concerning. That code of conduct is going to help. It's a step in the right direction. It's not. That's not going to lead necessarily to lower prices in the short term, but at least it helps to stabilize prices, to bring more fairness, more stability.
Just before I let you go, I know your time is limited. I just wanted to ask you very specifically, because the opposition has been talking a lot about the deals that you did land. And their view, and many Canadians share this as well, that your government is not transparent about the conditions placed on the kinds of money that you have put up to secure these investments in the EV space. Will the contracts that you have signed ever be made public? Yes or no, Minister?
Well, I would say it cannot be more public. We're talking about the investments tax credit. It's a tax credit. And Vashi, I think it is inconceivable for anyone to be against. Canada is ranked now ahead of China for the investment we've attracted in the EV sector. You're talking about, just like the Honda investment for a second, for Canadians to understand, this is the single largest investment, private investment by a company in Canada. It's the largest investment in the auto sector we have ever seen, and it's the largest investment by Honda Motor Company in its 75 years history. Every country in the world would be rejoicing. This is about us being ambitious as a country, and we're winning. It's
also about transparency. I did a tally of the amount of money that your government, taxpayer money, that your government has invested, $25.5 billion. I understand the point that you're making about the long-term impact on economic growth, but when you boil it down to numbers, $5 billion of investment between yourself and the government of Ontario, when the Honda deal is concerned, resulting in 1,000 permanent jobs. That's $5 million a job. I think Canadians just want to know, what kind of conditions have you secured in response? Will they be long-term union-paying jobs? Is there a cap on executive compensation? There has been government money in the past that have gone to corporations, and we've seen layoffs years later. That's all. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I just wonder, is there ever going to be a level of transparency from your government about what conditions was placed on the taxpayer money you've given to these corporations?
Well, listen, they're benefiting from a tax credit. And by the way, in the Honda deal, Vashi, let's make clear, they're investing $15.7 billion of their money, not Canadian taxpayer money. This is Honda's money coming in Canada. Every jurisdiction. Well, hold on, but they get a tax credit that is very transparent, and you cannot equate that to the number of jobs. You're talking about tens of thousands of jobs, because the plant they're building is for a century. So I think as Canadians, it could not be clearer. I mean, Bloomberg, don't take it from me. Bloomberg said Canada is winning ahead of China. Remind me, when did we win ahead of China when it comes to economic terms?
I'm not disputing that,
that's the world looking at Canada and saying this is the place to be.
Are those contracts ever going to be made public?
Well, I'm saying Honda is benefiting from the investment tax credit. And as you know, this is very transparent. It's in the tax code. It's 30% reimbursable based on what they invest in plant and equipment. Those were done in a different regime. We have made the contract transparent to the parliamentarian in committee. But at the end of the day, I hope that you see it, and Canadians, and at least the world see it, because not only you've seen this investment, you've seen Asahi Kasei just last week investing $1.5 billion We're building the ecosystem of the future. We're building the economy of the 21st century. This is a transformational, industrial transformation like we've never seen before. And the good thing, we're leading it. And the good thing is that it's going to provide jobs for decades and generations to come. We should all be happy.
Okay, I'm going to leave it on that note, Minister. I appreciate your time as always. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Talk to you.